In this video, I speak with three men who collectively have several decades of experience directing youth choirs. My first question is, can you talk about what happens to a boy's singing voice as a result of puberty?
The treble voice, so the voice that like all kids have, especially for males, it just starts to shrink.
You lose the top end first, and you start to have this lower end, and sometimes it will pop down to be very low. You may have a high voice and a low voice and nothing in between.
The voice can go through any number of gyrations to figure out what range it's going to end up in.
And you hear the usual trying to figure out what voice to use, and it gets to be rather complicated. What voice should I sing in? I used to sing soprano, and now I can't sing soprano, but I can't sing bass. How do you find a part for them to sing comfortably? They don't want to be singing in the girls section. So what do you do with them?
Wow. Does that mean there are occasions when in a high school choir, boys are singing girls' parts?
They could be.
It's nice to avoid that because most boys are aware of, hey, I'm singing the same part as my female peers, and that seems awkward.
Oh, it's more than awkward. I mean, could you imagine being razzed because you're singing with the girls, or in the girls' part, especially high school?
Because boys' voices are more noticeable in their change. Their voice can crack, their voice can do all sorts of things that can make it feel very uncomfortable for everyone in the room. As a teacher, like, I have talked about that, Johnny's voice may do this thing, but like, it's cool, like, right? And they're all like, yeah, it's cool. Like, we're all growing and learning. So that does help, because it's a very vulnerable thing if your voice all of a sudden cracks and everyone kind of laughs at you or something.
There were some boys that the struggle was just too much, and maybe their passion wasn't as strong. When their voice was changing, trying to figure out, which voice do I use now, Mr. Dean? And it's like, well, it's not fitting here. It's not fitting here. Wait a few weeks. Let's see how things change.
That's where I think that's where we kind of may lose kids sometimes, because again, we don't properly help them transition through that. I also have a student right now, a 7th grade student who, he still has that pure boy sound. And I think there's a struggle for some kids thinking like, but I'm a 7th grader and my friend sounds like he's singing lower. And so now I don't want to sound like a boy soprano anymore, because that's not cool.
I remember a lad when I was in high school, and that was the early 70s. And he was small. He was, slow to develop. And he sang in those sections, and we all built him up and loved him.
Are there times when puberty will cause vocal changes for a boy, and then that will discourage him, and he might have been doing well in singing up to that point, and then he maybe has some embarrassing moments, and it's taking a while to find his new voice, and he'll quit singing?
In a group setting, then that depends on the director totally and completely, because that director will then help them be at ease, find music that will keep them in a range that doesn't tax their voices, and is very patient and explains to them what's going on. And it doesn't matter if it's a male or a female director at that level. It's just the director needs to understand the male voice and what's happening there.
So some of the boys that stayed with us, we would sing songs where maybe they started in the soprano part and then went to the alto part and then went to the lower alto part.
Oh, so you're saying the boys in the bel canto high school choir at the church were not singing bass or even tenor?
No, they were singing. They continued to sing in falsetto. So as their voice changed, they were not singing in, I don't want to say real voice, but in their changed voice.
Do you remember experiencing frustration yourself, or seeing that among your peers when the voice was changing?
Totally, yes. Kind of a feeling of, I can't do this. Like, I want to sing up here, but my voice just gives out and I can't do it. most kids will just try to figure out how to do something, right? Like, okay, if I can do this, I'll figure out a way. So I do remember when I was in high school, this was a little older, I sang tenor. So I sang high, the highest male parts. And over the years, I graduated to bass, but I'm pretty confident that me singing tenor was mostly in my falsetto, that I wasn't a real tenor, but I was able to produce good sound like in my falsetto. I wouldn't say that my teacher really in high school talked to me about that. So while I could have been frustrated trying to sing my chest voice up there, I kind of just adapted on my own, singing my head voice up there. With the students that I've worked with, I've honestly tried to find as many ways to avoid them getting frustrated. Like if I'm like playing a note and say, sing it, it's harder to match pitch than if I were to just sing it myself. So that's kind of one thing that I'm intentionally trying to be a little more thoughtful about, especially with guys. Another thing that I remember when I was student teaching in a middle school, a young male will come in and not really have a keen sense of where a pitch is. And so they may just go like, oh, or something. And to get them to feel, oh, or oh, like to get them to kind of explore the full gamut. If you just ask them to do that, they may not really know how to do it or want to do it. But if you say like, okay, throw a frisbee across the room, or like if you're like going fishing and like wheeling a fishing, it kind of just, I don't know what it does, but there's something physical that gets them to know how their voice can shift up or down.
The challenge is how do you keep boys interested through that vocal change? How do you keep them singing? When I was younger in my career, I went to this, talked to this guy who had this wonderful youth choir. And I said, how do you get boys in your choir? And he said, it pretty much goes like this. Hey, Steve, want to go get a Coke? And I said, okay, so you're saying relationship. Yes, relationship. I have to say that the boys, I was just so happy that they stayed in our community, because it really was a community that sang. The way that it ministered to them, heart, soul, spirit, and singing captures a physical, a mental, an artistic expression and challenge that few other things in life does. For some of them, it was their place of refuge every week. It was a place where they can leave the world behind. It's a place where 90 minutes passes like 10 minutes. And it was so fulfilling to know that we're providing a place for them to grow and to mature that's safe, and bringing beauty and art and truth into the world, into their life.
What are some reasons that girls in a high school choir would want more boys in the choir?
Well, I would guess probably socially. Choir's fun. Like it's a place that kids can really feel themselves. They can express things. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't sometimes hiccups, because maturity wise, a ninth grade girl can be very different than a ninth grade boy. Typically, the boys in a high school classroom are going to be a lot more rambunctious.
They're showing off and looking for attention when they're with the girls.
And so sometimes that can negatively impact an experience for a female singer who's just a little more focused. So, but I also think, to be honest, a benefit of sometimes having male voices with female voices is it does give a little more depth to the sound. It kind of feels a little more enriching.
Would that enable them to sing a broader range of music they might find more fulfilling to participate in that choir for?
Blair, that's exactly it. Yes. First of all, it's a cool sound, to have those low voices. That's a wonderful thing. It makes the choir better. It gives you the opportunity to do much more challenging and fulfilling music.
If I only have 3 guys, I'm not going to be able to do a tenor and a bass. I have to just do like a baritone part. So you're really now only doing 2-part or 3-part music.
The great classics are pieces that are written for soprano, alto, tenor, bass, mixed choirs.
What are some reasons that you think there aren't more boys in high school choirs?
if they are students that, let's say, do sing in middle school, but then go to high school and don't sing, I think often there's a level that the boys probably aren't given as much attention in a rehearsal setting. So again, if you have a choir of 30 females and only 10 males, there's just probably the likelihood that the 10 males are not going to get the same amount of attention that the sopranos and altos do in a rehearsal setting. They just feel a lack of being interested in and kind of looked over. I think that can contribute to some boys not continuing. And additionally, depending on the music that's picked, again, the part that they are singing is just not really that exciting. The sopranos always get the melody. They get to sing the melody, and the basses get to sing, these 3 notes, and that's not always as fulfilling either. So it could be the repertoire that's picked just doesn't challenge them, or just doesn't kind of interest them as much. What I've observed, especially with choirs that are, let's say, tenor bass only, the directors are they're just very rambunctious. And so in some ways it kind of does feed into a stereotype, if you will, of, boys just want to like have fun, and they want to like, be rough and be loud and be this sort of thing. I know a colleague that when they're rehearsing, if the choir messes up, he'll like pull out like a yellow flag like you'd see in football and like penalty.
Do you think some adolescent boys are put off from singing in choirs because that's viewed as a thing that girls do? And maybe even like singing itself as an act is a feminine type of thing?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I see kids, 3rd grade, 4th grade, that they're all doing it. And then I think there's just that time that it switches, where boys become more put off by it. And I think part of it is the voice changing. Again, them not really knowing how to navigate through that change. I think it's also true that if you look at music teachers in a public school setting, you're more often going to see females teaching elementary, whereas then there are actually more males teaching high school. The benefit of that is, having a female in an elementary setting, again, they're able to model singing really well because they're all singing at that same pitch. When a boy's voice starts to change, if the boy doesn't have a model that can sing in their octave, I think it's harder for students to then again know how to navigate through that.